Okay, so today we're diving into something that I think a lot of listeners have probably thought about before, but maybe not in a ton of detail.
Okay. Yeah.
We are going deep on song structure.
Yeah. The architecture of music.
Exactly. So it's the fundamental framework, shapes the song from its beginning to end. And we are doing this deep dive because I think it's super important for anyone who wants to be a better songwriter to understand the nuts and bolts of how these songs are put together. And we've gone deep, man. We've looked at historical trends, psychological principles, all just to give you a better, more nuanced understanding of song structure.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's more than just verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Right? Like there's so much more to it. And it's so interesting to look at how all these pieces work together in different ways.
So our mission here is to give you, the listener, the insight into these sort of structural principles so that you can approach your songwriting with more intention, with more creativity.
And not just be like, oh, I have to follow this one formula.
Exactly.
There are options. There are lots of options.
Well, let's rewind a little bit. Let's look back.
Okay.
What can we learn from how songs were structured in the past?
So, I mean, you think about classical music, right? Like you got your sonata-allegro form or you got your ternary ABA structure, which is basically like statement, contrast, and return. And these weren't just like academic exercises. They were really concerned with how these musical ideas develop, how they interact with each other. So like in sonata form, the idea of thematic development. You present a musical idea, you explore it, you kind of turn it on its head.
Yeah.
And then you bring it back, transplant.
Right. That is that, man.
And that is a great way to think about your song sections. They're having a conversation with each other.
Oh, I like that. I never thought about it that way. The sections of a song are like, oh, what are you going to say next? And then it responds.
Exactly.
That's cool. And then what about blues and early jazz? I feel like those are so foundational to so much of the music that's come off there.
Absolutely. Like 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
So resilient.
Yeah.
Because it's cyclical.
Yeah.
You got that repeating harmonic progression. You can have endless variation melodically, lyrically.
But it never loses,
It doesn't lose you.
The ground
It's
game.
always there.
Yeah.
So that's something you can use.
Even outside of blues music.
Outside of blues.
Yeah.
100%. And then the ABA form, you think of Gershwin, I got rhythm.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically you're setting up this familiarity, and then that B section, that's where you have a departure. That's where the harmonics, the melodic interest comes in. You don't have to go full chorus every time.
I see.
You can be a little bit more subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these aren't just like, oh, these things happened in the past.
Huh.
These are actually strategies that can inform us as songwriters.
Right. 100%.
Each day.
Yeah, and then you have rock and pop.
Yeah.
Verse-chorus structure really takes hold.
Yeah, that's what everyone thinks of when they think of like, oh, a pop song structure.
Right. So, and it was really bands like the Beatles who sort of solidified this.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is, the verse will handle the narrative. The chorus is going to be that emotional anchor.
Right.
The part that's going to get stuck in your head.
That earworm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is they would also introduce the bridge.
Oh.
And that's where you get the change of pace, change of perspective.
It keeps the song fresh.
Prevents it from getting stale.
Yeah.
So, you're understanding this progression going from thematic development, cyclical harmony, to this verse-chorus with a contrasting bridge.
Right.
It gives you a lot of options.
It's like you have a whole box of tools.
Exactly.
Instead of just like a hammer.
Yeah, you got a whole workshop.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to sort of like more modern pop music.
Yeah, things are still evolving, right?
Like, how has that structure changed?
So, post-2000 pop, what we're seeing a lot of is the verse pre-chorus chorus loop.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's really prioritizing the immediate impact of the chorus.
Right.
And the pre-chorus becomes this ramp-up.
Okay, so it's all about getting to that chorus.
It get you to that chorus.
And it's like, how do you craft that pre-chorus to get the most impact?
To get the most out of it.
Yeah. So it reflects kind of like today's listening habits, right?
It does. I mean, people, they don't have a lot of patience these days. You got to get that hook in there quick.
Get it in quick. Okay, so we've got this historical context. Let's get into like the real nuts and bolts of these structures.
Okay.
And how they can inform our songwriting. Let's start with like that, the real workhorse.
Okay.
The verse-chorus structure.
Verse-chorus, classic. I mean, the power of that structure is really the balance between the two.
Right.
The verse is where you're going to deliver the details, the story, you're developing the idea. The chorus is going to be that emotional center. That's the message that you want to really get across.
Right.
You think of something like Taylor Swift's Shake It Off.
Okay, yeah.
The verses are all about the frustration.
Yeah.
The chorus is this anthemic release.
Yeah.
So, when you're writing a song, Think about that relationship between your verses and your choruses.
Right.
Are they contrasting enough? Is there that push and pull?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Does the chorus effectively kind of amplify?
Amplify those feelings, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Now we have AABA.
AABA.
Which maybe feels a little old-fashioned.
Maybe a little bit.
But it still pops up.
It still pops up in interesting ways. I mean, maybe not in the top 40 so much.
Right.
But what it really emphasizes is repetition.
Okay.
So that second A section, it's varied.
Okay.
And then you have that B section. That's where you introduce the contrast, new harmonic color. So you're building interest.
Right.
Without having to go all out every time.
Okay, so there's more subtlety there.
Well, the more nuance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're going for a more like, I don't know, classic jazzy kind of feel.
Yeah. Or even if you just want to be a little more subtle.
Yeah.
AABA is a great structure to try out.
Yeah, okay. Now, the pre-chorus, I mean, it feels like such a vital element.
It does.
Of so many songs today.
Oh, yeah.
What's its core function for a songwriter?
It's all about setup.
Okay.
It's building that anticipation for the chorus.
Right.
So maybe the harmony starts to shift, maybe the melody starts to rise. It's leading you somewhere.
Yeah.
So ask yourself, does your pre-chorus really set up the chorus?
Right.
Are you leading the listener effectively?
Does it give you that feeling of like, oh, here we go.
Here it comes.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. If you're struggling with your pre-chorus, think about that.
That anticipation.
That build, that tension.
The build, yeah. Okay. And a bridge, a lot of times people talk about it as like a chance to kind of shake things up a little bit.
Right. It's your opportunity for contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So, harmonically, you can change things up.
Okay.
Lyrically, and introduce a new perspective.
Okay.
Change the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to go somewhere else.
Right.
If your verse is setting up a problem,
yeah,
and your chorus is expressing a feeling about that problem,
mm-hmm.
how does the bridge, develop that feeling further? Does it offer this angle?
Instead of just being like a completely, different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then finally we have the coda.
The coda.
Now this is more than just an afterway, right?
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It should give you a sense of closure.
Okay.
So maybe it's a variation on the main theme.
Okay.
Maybe it's a final statement. Maybe it's get lingering fade out.
Mm-hmm.
But think about how you want the song to feel.
To resonate?
To resonate, yeah.
Yeah.
After it's over.
After it's over, yeah.
That coda can provide a resolution.
Okay.
That you're not going to get if you just, fade out.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier Bohemian Rhapsody.
Ah, yes.
Which is a great example of a through-composed song.
Right.
And that's completely different from these other structures we've been talking about.
It's a very different approach.
It's like, what can we learn from that approach?
So, with a through-composed structure, it's really about following a linear narrative.
Okay.
Or an emotional arc.
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be a lot of repetition.
Okay.
It's about that unfolding story.
Mm-hmm.
Or feeling.
Right.
So it's not the norm. You're not going to hear that on the top 40.
Right.
But it's a great reminder that you don't always have to stick to the formula.
Right.
If your creative vision demands something different, go for it.
Totally. Okay, so we've looked at these kind of like common forms,
Mm-hmm.
but how can we, look at different genres and how they approach structure to maybe like expand our songwriting toolkit?
And I mean, genre conventions are a great place to start.
Okay.
Take EDM, for example.
Okay.
A lot of it is about building energy.
Right.
Those risers.
Yeah.
And then that sudden release with the drop.
Yeah.
So even if you're not writing electronic music,
Right.
think about that.
That principle.
That principle
Yeah.
of creating and releasing tension
Yeah.
on that large scale.
Right.
Think about how you can use dynamics in your own songs
Okay.
to make those moments more impactful.
Okay, yeah. So what about like hip hop?
Hip-hop, okay, so hip-hop, you're still going to have those verses, those choruses.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you have these extended intros and outros.
Oh, okay.
This isn't just like a stylistic choice.
Right.
It's practical
Okay.
for DJs.
Okay, yeah.
They're going to want to be able to loop those sections.
Right.
Maybe mix in other tracks.
Yeah.
So as a songwriter, think about those different sections in your song.
Okay.
Do they have a function beyond just being there?
Okay, so you can almost like engineer your songs
Yeah.
to be more useful in other contexts.
Exactly.
That's cool. And then, there's genres that just break the mold completely.
Oh, yeah.
Like progressive rock.
Progressive rock.
Yeah.
You got bands like Genesis.
Yeah.
Super's Ready, these epic tracks with multiple movements.
Right.
Totally unconventional structures. It's all about experimentation.
Right.
It's pushing the boundaries.
But it has to work, right?
It has to work. It can't just be random.
Yeah.
It's got to serve the music.
Right. You also mentioned global music traditions and how, like, looking outside of Western pop
Hmm.
can influence our thinking about this stuff.
Right. So, you look at something like Indian ragas,
Okay.
where you have this melodic framework,
Mm-hmm.
this rhythmic cycle.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is improvised,
Right.
right? So maybe you think about, having some core elements in your song,
Okay.
but then allowing for variations,
Mm-hmm.
instrumental breaks.
Right.
That could feel organic.
Right. So it's not completely like, okay, here are the bars and we have to stay within the lines. It's like, no, there's some flexibility there.
Right, there's flexibility. You got West African call and response.
Yeah.
Where those musical ideas are exchanged,
Yeah.
built upon.
Yeah.
So think about how, maybe your verse is a call, your chorus is a response.
Oh, I see.
And not just lyrically,
Yeah.
melodically, harmonically.
Yeah.
You're creating a conversation,
Hey.
a dialogue.
Oh, that's cool. Man, this is really making me think about song structure in a whole new way.
That's the goal.
Let's get into the psychology of it all.
Okay.
What makes certain structures so memorable?
Part of it's this thing called the mere exposure effect.
Okay.
It's basically, we tend to like things that we're familiar with.
Right.
So that's why the repetition in the chorus,
Yeah.
like in Satisfaction,
Yeah.
is so...
It gets stuck in your head.
It gets stuck in your head.
Yeah.
Well, as a songwriter, think about how memorable your chorus is.
Right.
Is it sticky?
Yeah.
Is it going to get in there?
Yeah.
And how are you using repetition to achieve that?
Right. But it's not just about like mindless repetition.
No, not at all.
It's about how the structure makes us feel.
Right. It's those tension and release cycles.
Yeah.
And that really mirrors how, stories unfold,
Yeah.
how our emotions kind of work.
Yeah.
So a verse might introduce a conflict,
Okay.
a feeling of longing.
Mm.
The pre-chorus built that tension, then the chorus is that release.
It's the catharsis.
This catharsis.
Yeah.
So you can map the emotional arc
Oh, wow.
of your song against that structure.
I never thought about it like that.
And it can help make the song more engaging,
Okay.
more satisfying
Yeah.
for the listener.
Yeah. So like ask yourself, what is the emotional journey
Exactly.
I want the listener to go on?
What do you want them to feel?
Yeah. And then how can the structure like guide them?
100%.
Okay. And what about earworms?
Earworms, gotta love them.
Yeah. Those hooks, bad romance.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get it out of your head.
Yeah.
Like, how does structure play into that?
So it's tapping into our auditory working memory,
Okay.
right? Those
Yeah.
really catchy, repetitive hooks.
Yeah.
They're designed to be easy to process,
Okay.
easy to remember.
Okay.
So when you're choosing your melodic and rhythmic motifs, especially in those key sections like the chorus,
Right.
think about that.
Yeah.
Think about how the brain's going to process that information.
Okay. Yeah. So you're not just like, oh, here's some cool notes.
No.
It's like, no, this is science.
It's science, man.
Yeah. Okay. So now, how can songwriters kind of push beyond these established forms?
Yeah.
And find, new structures?
So, one way is to blend genres.
Okay.
Think about artists like Bjork.
Oh, yeah.
You got electronic elements, classical elements,
Yeah.
often really unique structures.
Yeah.
So you can combine elements from different genres.
Yeah.
Create something new.
Yeah. What about using structural asymmetry?
Asymmetry. Yeah, that's a fun one.
I feel like that can like really create a specific feeling.
It can. So you're basically talking about song sections that have unusual lengths,
Okay.
maybe unexpected juxtapositions,
Yeah.
like Paranoid Android by Radiohead.
Okay.
Those disjointed sections
Yeah.
create a real sense of unease,
Right.
and that reflects the lyrics.
Yeah.
Right. So think about how you can use structural shifts
Right.
to create those specific feelings.
Yeah.
Tension, surprise,
Okay. And you mentioned minimalism earlier.
minimalism. Yeah.
How does that like work in a songwriting context?
So, someone like Philip Glass,
Okay.
it's all about repetition
Yeah.
of these simple musical ideas,
Okay.
but with very subtle variations over time.
Okay.
So maybe not your typical pop structure,
Right.
but it shows how small changes can have a big impact
Right.
over time.
Right. It's cumulative.
Cumulative, yeah.
Okay. So it could be like you're subtly changing the verse melody
Yeah.
a little bit each time.
Absolutely.
And it gives this feeling of like evolution.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, technology has to be having some impact on how songs are structured today.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Think about DAWs, digital audio workstations,
Okay.
totally revolutionized music production,
Right.
nonlinear editing. You can move sections around so easily.
Right.
That's why you see those intro drop structures in EDM
Right. Where it's like, boom, you get the hook right away.
right away. It's all about, rearranging the pieces,
Right.
experimenting.
Yeah. And what about like streaming platforms, Are they having an impact?
Yeah. I mean, the data they're collecting,
Right.
it's definitely influencing trends.
Okay.
There's been studies that show that shorter intros,
Okay.
under 7 seconds,
Okay.
they tend to keep listeners engaged.
All right.
So that has a direct impact on where you put that hook.
Okay. Yeah, it's like you got to get it in there quick.
Got to get it in quick, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a practical consideration.
Yeah. So it's almost like there's this like data-driven aspect to songwriting now.
There is.
But how do you balance that with just like artistic intuition?
Right. Well, there are AI tools now
Oh, wow.
that can analyze tons of songs,
And-
identify patterns,
Oh, wow.
even predict trends.
Oh, wow.
But remember, these are just tools.
Right.
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 The artistry comes from you
Yeah.
balancing those insights
Mhm.
with your own intuition, your
Right.
own vision.
Yeah.
The data is information.
Right.
Let your instincts guide you,
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately.
Okay, man. This has been such a cool deep dive into song structure.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So to bring it all together for all of you listeners out there.
So, the key takeaway here is that understanding song structure isn't about following a formula.
Right.
It's about having a deeper awareness of all the tools that are available to you.
Right.
So we looked at the history. We looked at the functions of all those different sections.
Yeah.
We looked at different genres, the psychology of it all,
Yeah.
the technology.
Yeah.
By understanding all of these elements,
Right.
you can make more informed choices in your own songwriting.
Right.
It's about expanding your vocabulary
Yeah.
so that you can express your musical ideas in new and interesting ways.
Right. And it's about moving beyond just like instinctively arranging parts.
Yeah.
And really thinking about, okay, what are the choices I'm making?
Absolutely.
And how does that impact the song?
And by understanding the conventions, you can either lean into them or subvert them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's up to you.
So as you head back to your own songwriting,
Yeah.
here's something to think about. Pick a song that you really, really connect with
Okay.
and just dissect the structure.
Yeah.
Like really think about how does that structure contribute to the emotional impact,
Mm-hmm.
to how memorable it is.
Yeah.
What are the choices that were made, even the subtle ones?
Mm-hmm.
And what can you learn from that?
Okay.
And how can you apply it to your own work?
Exactly. It's about taking all this information
Yeah.
and using it as inspiration
Yeah,
for your own creative journey.
exactly. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.